Roddy McDowall was born Roderick Andrew Anthony Jude McDowall in the Beulah Hill region of South London on September 17, 1928. His parents were a 32-year-old Scotsman and World War I veteran, Thomas Andrew McDowall, and a 29-year-old Irish girl, Winifred Corcoran McDowall. They already had one child, a daughter, Virginia Grace, born on September 23, 1927.
We were 11 months and 3 weeks apart. And my mother always brought us up as twins. We were very close. We really didn't play with other children. We were totally dependent on each other.
Winifred McDowall was a star-struck, aspiring actress who had never made it to the stardom she intensely desired for herself and hoped to create big futures for her two adorable children. Noticing that they were shy, Winifred enrolled Roddy and Virginia in elocution classes and started them acting in plays. And when they started winning drama trophies, and people kept telling her that they were absolutely adorable and should be in the movies, Winifred set herself the task of bringing it about. "My mother had complete control over us," Roddy said later in life. "She would make all the decisions and pretend that my sister and I were making them." As a young boy, Roddy was often praised for his impeccable manners and extensive vocabulary. Even then, he was very well-spoken and seemed adult in many ways. In 1937, after a few inevitable false starts and disappointments, Roddy was signed with his first agent and began getting small roles in an occasional movie. Due to the child labor laws of the late 1930s, however, he was often sneaked into the studios around London while crouched on the floor of the automobile as it passed through the gates. In some films, he was only an extra, something Winifred would never admit, but he had good roles in Just William, 1939, as Ginger, You Will Remember, 1940, and This England, 1941.
You heard my order, take him. And in half an hour I must see his head stuck bravely on a pike above the church door. Speak.
Look, my young lord. What are they going to do?
A game. A fine, exciting game. Wrestling.
I've always wanted to watch wrestling. Is it a good prize?
Yes, it is a good prize.
When do they start?
Now.
He also did modeling and advertising spots. Most notably, he did magazine ads for Persil, a popular detergent still being made today, and for various breakfast cereals. In 1939, World War II began, when Roddy was only 11 years old. After the Nazi bombings of London began, Roddy collected shrapnel and other relics. His parents had a hard time keeping him inside during the air raids because he was so curious and interested in watching things from the yard. The family often crouched in a cupboard below the stairs during air raids when they were at home, and Virginia recounted many times that she and Roddy had to sleep there in order to remain safe. One day during the Blitz, their home was hit by bombs, and one fell through the bathroom roof. It was at this point that his father made the decision to have his wife and children immigrate to the United States for their own safety, and Thomas McDowall enlisted in the war effort. The day finally came for them to leave, and Roddy had to say goodbye to his father on the Liverpool docks. He understood, tacitly anyway, that he would now be the man of the family while Tom served in the Merchant Marines, and took his new role in life very seriously. During the trip over the Atlantic, Win decided to take advantage of her adorable children's talent for performing and put on a production of Puck and the Fairy aboard ship one night, in order to stave off boredom for her children and the other passengers on board. Virginia mentioned in Roddy's A&D biography that, quote, "Mother just happened to have the costumes with her." In September of 1941, they arrived in New York, having only $42 with them, as this was all the British government allowed them to take out of the country, and within 2 weeks, Roddy had an American agent. "My mother contacted agents," Roddy said, "one of whom sent me to the MGM office to test for the yearling. They said that I was too English, but that at 20th Century Fox they were looking for a child for How Green Was My Valley. After receiving this tip, Winifred rushed her son to the location given them by the agent, and although Roddy was thoroughly exhausted, he read very well and impressed those who auditioned him. 2 or 3 days later, he was asked to make a screen test at the 20th Century Fox Studios on 56th Street. After this was done, Roddy, Win, and V took a trip to Washington, D.C. to visit Win's brother. While in D.C., but before they had time to do much sightseeing, they got a telegram from Fox telling them Roddy was wanted to do another screen test for the film, and they were to come back to California. Roddy, Win, and V were put up by the studio at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, and Roddy did the second screen test for John Ford and Darryl F. Zanuck. Roddy got the part of Hugh, and was given a contract at Fox. The McDowalls now had to find permanent accommodations. Roddy was almost immediately put to work, and the family bought a house on Dunleer Drive in the Cheviot Hills area of Los Angeles. His first film was Manhunt, in which he played a ship's cabin boy, Vayner, who helps hide Walter Pidgeon's character from his Nazi enemies.
You seem to be in a bit of trouble, sir.
More than a bit, I'm afraid.
Have you committed a crime, sir?
No.
Was it, about a woman?
I see you know life.
I thought so.
He next did Confirm or Deny. These small roles, though his part as Albert Perkins in Confirm or Deny was considerably larger than that of Vayner in Manhunt, took up his time before How Green Was My Valley went into production in June of 1941. The film had a good deal of trouble getting off the ground, but once it reached its completion and was released, it was a smash hit. Roddy reached instant stardom and continued working steadily for Fox for the next 5 years. But once the actor hit puberty and began growing into manhood, the studio no longer felt that he was marketable material, and his agent soon informed 17-year-old Roddy that he had outgrown the movies and would never work again, because he wasn't cute anymore. Roddy was heartbroken, and determined to prove his agent wrong, took every acting job made available to him, but was frustrated by the fact that he was repeatedly being made to play awkward adolescents.
Head waiter Stanley, look old.
Do you wish a table?
Table for two, please. It was a good idea bringing the walking stick.
Now nearly 18, Roddy wanted roles with more meat. In an effort to help her son, Wynn negotiated with Fox to release Roddy from his contract. She was successful, but she didn't realize that she had now caused a major problem for her son. He was now out of work and didn't know how to continue being the family's principal breadwinner. No other major studio would hire him, feeling he was too awkward and gawky looking to be fitting for a leading role. He managed to get a contract with a third-rate studio called Monogram, a part of Hollywood's infamous Poverty Row, and would make several films during the next 5 years with them, most notably Tuna Clipper and Killer Shark. There was not enough money. Who was going to do the work? I had no money, Roddy commented. Though I had made over $100,000 a year. Had my father not been so mesmerized by my mother, I would have had every dime I ever made. My father was scrupulously honest, but Mother had such control over him that he was powerless. Roddy hated all of the films he did for Monogram, but later felt hopeful when Kidnapped began production. Now 20 years old, and working as the youngest executive producer in history for the studio, he felt the film might be a promising one, and cast his mother as the innkeeper in the movie.
I've got a lovely beef stew, fresh new greens, scones, and an aged cheese.
It sounds like a feast. Bring it all.
And the young lady?
Oh, she'll be down in a bit.
Aye.
Roddy's high hopes were dashed, however, as Kidnapped didn't turn out so well because of the shoestring budget allowed for it. But he was later able to get work with Orson Welles in his stage production of Macbeth, and then later reprised his role as Malcolm Macduff in the film in 1948. The next 2 years of difficulty and struggle snailed by, and Roddy became more and more frustrated. He had no life of his own. His mother was controlling every aspect of his life, and he was becoming more and more concerned for his future. Roddy's friend Jane Powell later described Winifred McDowall as, quote, a classic stage mother. I realized it was terribly important for Roddy to get away from home. She was destroying him as a man, as a person, and as a talent. The whole family was under her thumb. Every time the family didn't do what she wanted, she'd feign a heart attack.
Roddy at that point had the feeling that he didn't know how to act very well. And he expressed that view quite openly.
He was in great distress as to what to do with his life. His mother was a very demanding woman. Roddy never had any free time to himself.
He felt the need to escape and get away and change his life because he's bright. And it was devastating for Winifred when he left home. But he knew he had to do it to survive as a human being, essentially, and certainly to develop as an artist.
By 1950, Roddy left Monogram. The time had come to move forward alone, and in 1951, Roddy, now 22 years old, moved to New York City. Though he felt incredibly guilty about this decision, Roddy knew he needed to get away from his mother and Hollywood in order to find himself and discover what he really wanted to do with his life. He thought he wanted to be a character actor, but wondered if he could be successful, as he felt that he didn't know how to act very well. But acting was something he loved, and therefore wished to learn how to do it better. Since he had long had photography as a hobby, so much so that it was an expensive one, he started investigating the possibility of becoming a professional photographer. While searching for information regarding this idea, he got a call from a man at the lab where he'd been sending his pictures for development. The man told him that he had a good eye and should not be sending his pictures there to be processed. Roddy went to meet the man and then worked for 6 months in the darkroom at the lab, learning how to do everything. At some point during his training, he had an allergic reaction to the chemicals, but persisted, despite his discomfort. Later on, he learned a lot from talking with Richard Avedon and Elliot Elisaphan, observing and studying their pictures. While studying photography, Roddy also studied acting, under such luminaries as Mira Rostova and Bobby Lewis, meanwhile working steadily in theater productions both on and off Broadway. He also began acting in television from 1951 to 1954, and steadily began appearing in one television show per year. Soon he graduated from his schooling on his craft, and began working more steadily in television, but still working consistently on stage. His stage credits during the years of 1950 to 1960 are staggering, as he worked in 23 productions during this 10-year period. He began gaining critical acclaim and adulation for his stage work when he starred as Bentley Summerhays in George Bernard Shaw's Misalliance in 1953 on Broadway. The reviews of his performance were superb, and led to his being cast in The Tempest by the American Shakespeare Festival, where he played Ariel the Sprite and later Octavian in Julius Caesar. Soon word spread like wildfire of Roddy's dramatic capabilities, and in 1957, Roddy was cast as Artie Strauss in the controversial drama Compulsion, based upon the infamous Leopold and Loeb murder trial. In 1960, Roddy's work in theater gained him 2 prestigious awards for Best Supporting Actor, a Tony for the stage production of The Fighting Cock, where he starred alongside Rex Harrison, and an Emmy for his performance in the NBC production of Not Without Honor. In the fall, he became a part of the production of Camelot, alongside Julie Andrews and Richard Burton, playing the evil Sir Mordred. The play was a success, and Roddy was now finding himself a celebrated performer in television and on stage. He was now ready to return to Hollywood and take up where he had left off. In 1961, Roddy was asked to reprise his role as Octavian in 20th Century Fox's upcoming production of Cleopatra, where he would be working once again with Richard Burton and Rex Harrison. He agreed, but the production was fraught with problems, which kept many of the main characters, including its star, Roddy's best friend Elizabeth Taylor, out of work and lying around on the set waiting to be used in a scene. This resulted in Roddy and Richard Burton, who was also a close friend of Roddy's, being given cameo roles in The Longest Day in order to stave off boredom. Finally, Cleopatra wrapped and hit theaters in 1963 after being in production for over 2 years. Roddy's role as Octavian, though only a supporting role, gained him the attention of the Academy, and he was nominated for an Oscar for his performance. Unfortunately, a careless clerical error cost him his award. He received nothing more from the Academy than a lazy written letter of apology for the mistake, and was never given an opportunity to win an Oscar again. Fans at the time, and to this very day, still feel this was a grave injustice deliberately committed against him. Roddy was disappointed by the loss of this major award, but as was characteristic of his nature, he remained stoically silent about the incident and never spoke about it publicly. Through the 1960s, Roddy worked steadily in movies and television, appearing on average in 5 to 7 films and 1 to 2 television performances each year, with 1961 being an exception due to the holdup with Cleopatra. Behind the camera all these years, Roddy had been snapping pictures wherever he went, and gathered up an extensive collection of photographs of his friends and other celebrities he was asked to photograph. And when Roddy sold a picture he had taken of Judy Holliday to Vogue magazine in 1960, he was able to gain a career as a professional photographer, working for some of the country's most respected magazines. In 1966, Roddy compiled a collection of the photographs he had taken over the years of Hollywood's most notably celebrated names, and published them in a series of 4 coffee table books, which he called Double Exposure.
Now? I'd like to invite you to look at some excellent photographs that were taken by our next guest. Now, these are photographs of some of our leading film stars, as you can see. And all of these pictures were taken by our young photographer guest, who is an equally good actor, ladies and gentlemen, Roddy McDowall. Now, Roddy, if you had I'll call him Rowdy. A friend of mine has never called him Roddy yet. He said, "What's Rowdy doing?" If you had your choice, what would you rather do? Be an actor or a photographer?
Both.
That's a very, very honest answer, and I certainly
It's true.
Well, I mean, if you had to do one.
Both. I would. I can't answer it, because I really enjoy doing both equally as much.
Roddy took some pictures of me, and they're in a photography book, which is one of the most exquisite books I think I've ever seen in my life, about anything.
Thank you.
No, it's really true. These are the great, the near great, the not so great, a lot of very interesting people. And Roddy came to my house, a long time ago, and he was taking pictures of me while I was cooking Chinese food. And at precisely a given point where I took the cover off the pot, the wok, Roddy took the picture. And this is the picture that's in the book. The most beautifully definitive photograph you've ever seen. Now, wouldn't you know that was me? Huh? That could have been my Aunt Sarah. Now, Roddy, you've got to do something better than that on your next printing. You've got to get a picture where at least they recognize who it is.
Well, as a matter of fact, Danny, one of the reasons I came here tonight is because I want to take another picture of you.
Really? Well, I tell you what, while Roddy gets ready to take my picture, you keep your eye on these pictures coming up. Okay?
Roddy was now not only a celebrated actor, but a well-known and highly respected photographer, and had finally found true happiness for himself and his career. He now only had one dream left to achieve: to be a director. In 1968, Roddy found unbridled success once again when he took on the role of an ape called Cornelius in the first installment of the Planet of the Apes saga. Playing alongside Charlton Heston, Roddy's character was a scientist in a post-apocalyptic Earth that has been completely turned upside down. The roles in society are reversed, and apes are now in complete control, while humans are kept in cages and are used as slaves and pets, and are experimented on in medical and scientific research. In this Earth, the humans are incapable of speech, are non-intelligent, and are seen the way animals are seen in a zoo. But when 3 astronauts crash land on the planet, Cornelius and his fiancée Zira soon learn that the future holds something different for ape kind. Siding with Heston's character of Taylor, Cornelius and Zira are accused of heresy and deposed from their positions of prominence. The movie was a smash hit, and Roddy was soon asked to return for the sequel, Beneath the Planet of the Apes. But at this point, he had begun production on his first directorial project, The Ballad of Tam Lin, starring Ava Gardner and then newcomer Ian McShane, and he was unavailable to reprise the role of Cornelius. He was therefore temporarily replaced for the second film, and he carried on with fulfilling his dream of being a director. Tam Lin was a labor of love for Roddy. He created it with Ava Gardner in mind. Gardner was an actress Roddy both revered and worshipped, and he tailor-made the role of Michaela Cazaret, or Mickey, for her. But the production ran out of money, and Roddy was not able to make it to the full scale he had originally desired. The film wasn't horribly affected, however, and Roddy was able to sell it to American International Studios. This was a mistake, however, which Roddy learned far too late, as American International was a studio notorious for screwing over its clients. Without Roddy's knowledge or permission, AI cut the film to pieces and released it under the alternate title of The Devil's Widow, in an attempt to make it a horror film. Roddy was outraged and attempted to have his name removed from the opening credits, but failed. Subsequently, when the butchered film did badly at the box office, it wasn't American International that received the criticism, but McDowall himself. Again, as was usual of his character, Roddy remained publicly silent about the disappointment, but he never directed again. In 1971, Roddy was able to return to the Planet of the Apes franchise, and finally reprised his role as Cornelius in Escape from the Planet of the Apes. And in 1972, he returned again to play Caesar, the son of Cornelius and Zira, who had sacrificed themselves to ensure their baby could live. And finally, in 1973, he returned to play Caesar again in the final installment of the 5-movie saga. But that wasn't the end of Planet of the Apes. The movies were wildly successful, which sparked interest in the creation of a television series. Once again, Roddy was cast in a leading role, this time playing Galen, an assistant to Dr. Zaius who becomes a fugitive while helping 2 astronauts in their journey to return home. The show was mildly successful in America, but lacked the steam and creative talent it needed to keep the storyline fresh and consistent, and it was cancelled after 14 episodes. Shortly after, it found new life in Britain, and now, because of its British resurgence, is available on DVD worldwide. The early demise of the Planet of the Apes television series was no big deal for Roddy, however, and he continued working steadily throughout the remainder of the 1970s, working in a melting pot of various projects, many of which kept recycling around the premise of science fiction. The 1980s brought the same for Roddy, working in television and films and still cranking out up to a total of 9 projects each year. In 1982, he became involved in another soon-to-be-aborted TV series called Tales of the Gold Monkey, which was created by Donald P. Belisario. The series didn't do very well, lasting for only 22 episodes, but it became a fan classic and is available on DVD today. By the late 1980s, Roddy began another side career, lending his unique speaking voice as the narrator for audiobooks. He also began working in a plethora of children's animated cartoons, lending his voice to characters in series such as Superman, Batman the Animated Series, where he played Jarvis Tetch, aka the Mad Hatter, one of the Joker's many Arkham Asylum sidekicks. He also did a few episodes in the popular children's series Pinky and the Brain, where he voiced a gerbil called Snowball, whose sole ambition in life is to beat the Brain in his plans to take over the world. In 1987, Roddy released his second installment of photography books, Double Exposure Take 2, which received great acclaim. Later that year, he again put on his executive producer's hat and worked alongside Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell in the screwball comedy Overboard. In the 1990s, Roddy began working most steadily in made-for-TV movies and cartoon voiceover work. He still did regular films also, and continued with his photography projects. Double Exposure Takes 3 and 4 were released in 1992 and 1993. Also in 1992, Donald P. Belisario contacted Roddy again to do a guest appearance on his new and successful series Quantum Leap, where he was to play semi-alongside longtime friend and fellow child star Dean Stockwell. Roddy played a character called Edward Sinchin V, and was to be a replacement for Dean's character of Al Calavici in an alternate timeline. This occurs when Sam, played by Scott Bakula, who has leaped into his friend, almost fails in his attempt to prevent Al from being sent to the gas chamber after he's wrongfully accused of murder. Roddy appears in a few scenes holding Al's gummy bear mimicking hand link, communicating to the parallel hybrid replacement for Ziggy called Alpha. He successfully helps Sam prevent Al's death in the gas chamber and disappears without a wink or a goodbye, and the episode comes to a happy end. Unfortunately, this left us Roddy fans sighing with disappointment that we wouldn't get to see our favorite person again, despite our being thrilled for Al's ensured safety in the episode. In April of 1998, Roddy, who had been smoking since his late teens, was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer and was given only 6 months to live. Despite this horrible news, Roddy continued doing what he loved best, working, and kept taking on roles in TV, film, voiceovers, and on stage. His final stage performance was as Ebenezer Scrooge in A Christmas Carol, a role in which he alternated with another actor, Hal Linden. The production ran from November 18, 1997 to January 4, 1998. In 1997, Roddy learned that his film, The Ballad of Tam Lin, was in talks to be released on videotape for the first time. Eager to see his film released the way he had intended, he conducted an exhaustive and extensive search for the original negatives that had ended up on American International's cutting room floor. His search was successful, and he was able to edit the film the way he had originally intended to. It was released on videotape later that year, and has since been transferred to DVD. Roddy's edit of the film can easily be found under the name The Ballad of Tam Lin, whereas copies of American International's Disaster are still found under the name The Devil's Widow. Despite his difficulties, Roddy was able to win the battle for his film in the end. Roddy's final television performance was voicing Dr. Hugh Trevor in the episode Deadlock on Godzilla the Animated Series. The episode aired on February 6, 1999. Roddy died on October 3, 1998. During his lifetime, Roddy McDowall worked in 36 stage performances, 262 total film and television performances, 114 appearances as himself on television in interviews, narrations for biographies and appearances and game shows, 7 executive producers credits, 1 director's credit, 4 soundtrack contributions, 1 camera and electrical department credit for his work on That's Entertainment 3, 7 credits of thanks for work on documentaries. The documentary on Cleopatra was dedicated to his memory, 40 audiobooks, 6 recorded songs for musical productions, 38 radio appearances, and countless photographic contributions to various forms of print, film, and television. Thank you to Julie Carricker for helping me write this biography. Without your extensive knowledge, I would have some massive gaps in the bio. Thank you.
Wow, quite a Roddy deep dive, and great job, Zoe. Thanks a lot. If you're like Zoe and you love Roddy McDowall, you can hear more great stuff like this on her podcast, all about Roddy McDowall. It's called Not Just Yesterday, the Roddy McDowall Podcast. Just look for it on your favorite podcatcher, do a search, and you should be able to find it. Find it, download it, listen to it. You'll love it.